Welcome back to another one of my videos. I'm Adam from Adam's Corner, and I appreciate you guys watching this. Those of you who are, there were a lot of you who seemed to enjoy the King Kong review that I did a couple of weeks ago of the new 4K disc, as you see there. The Paramount release of the new 4K King Kong. I did that a couple of weeks ago, and of course, to remind people, there's also the Studio Canal version, 4K release of that has the extras that are missing on this one. So that's why I mentioned that. Those are very important. I thought I'd do a quick video about some of my personal memories of the 1976 King Kong. Everybody has a favorite movie, I guess, or a movie that really was the movie that changed them. And there were two for me. The first one was The Towering Inferno. In February of 1975, my parents made the decision to take me to see The Towering Inferno. I was only 4 at the time, which my father was pretty careful about what he let me watch. So it was kind of a surprise that he would actually allow me to see that movie at the age of 4. I was almost 5, but not quite. And so it was pretty intense, but intense in a good way. It was like a good shot of adrenaline to me, and I was an excitable child anyway. And so seeing The Towering Inferno just really ignited my passion for film, for lack of a better word. And it was 2 years later when the ads started cropping up, advertising King Kong 1976. The remake. I didn't know there was another King Kong. This was news to me. So I was in the first grade, and it was a big deal. And they were trumpeting this new King Kong, and I became fascinated with it. Very fascinated with it, as a matter of fact, and to the point where I wouldn't really shut up about it to my parents. Wasn't long after that I happened to go to the local store, and the local drugstore, as it were, and this book, The Creation of King Kong, which was written by the film's publicist, Bruce Barenberg, started cropping up in drugstores and grocery stores around that time. And so I saw it, and I started looking at the pictures in the book, and I was fascinated. I had to see this film. I was just so excited about the film and what it might be about or not. And so anyway, I think this book led as much to my excitement as anything. So in February of 1977, now the movie got a wide release in December of 76, but I lived in a small town about 45 minutes west of Charlotte. Charlotte, North Carolina is the largest city in North Carolina, and so I was about 45 minutes west of there, so in a little small town known as Lincolnton. And we had several theaters. We had a drive-in, the Starlight Drive-In, and we had a walk-in theater, the Century Theater, as it were. And so in this picture here, you'll see of the Century Theater is from the 1950s, about 20 years before I came to see King Kong there. So anyway, in February of 1977, they finally got it. And boy, was I pumped to see this film. Could not wait. And so my mother, during the week, one day, I guess it was Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm thinking, maybe even a Thursday. I can't be sure about the day, but I do know it was the first week in February of 1977 because I've double-checked the newspaper ads to make sure, and I know for a fact that it was the first week in February of 1977 when they ran it at our local theater. Promotional tie-ins were pretty abundant to the film, and here's one of them that I still have. This is an actual wrapper from Candy, the peanut butter cups that they were selling to market the film. So I've kept this all these years. Isn't that amazing? And I'm just a nostalgic old fool, I guess you would say. So my mother took me in, and I can actually remember what the trailers were that they were running in that night. Actually, it was Checkered Flag or Crash, which was a Joe Don Baker film where he's like a stock car racer who's sent to Thailand or some foreign country to do some sort of a race. I saw it years later. It was not good. And then there was The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which was the Charles B. Pierce, the director of The Legend of Boggy Creek, had directed this film about a series of murders in Arkansas that were never solved. And it was there was a hooded masked, or a masked killer who wore a white hood over his head, and he went around shooting people in Arkansas in the 40s. And I remember them saying that the killer was never found. And boy, did that make an impression on a 6-year-old me. I was terrified as to what, might be lurking about. He could be outside. You never know. So anyway, King Kong, saw it in February of 77, and it was life-changing. I'll never forget the experience and the feelings and the emotion of seeing King Kong for the first time when he's revealed and he's walking through the forest, and you see his eyes and the close-up, the tight shot on his face, played by Rick Baker, of course. I didn't know it at the time, because in the book it said that there was a 40-foot tall King Kong. And so as a 6-year-old boy, as I was, I believed this was a real 40-foot tall robot Kong. I was pretty sure that it was. You couldn't have convinced me otherwise. Of course, they did a good job keeping the fact that Rick Baker was actually the man in the suit playing Kong. They kept that out of the press pretty well, I would say. So anyway, I saw it. It was a life-changing film, and that I just was immediately, it just put me into a whole other realm in terms of my fandom of King Kong, my enthusiasm for the film. I just couldn't get it out of my mind. Just wanted to talk about it to anybody that would listen. Unfortunately, when you grow up in a small town where there aren't a lot of true film buffs and you're 6 years old, it's hard to find people who will talk to you about such things. At school, life was tough for me around that time because I was constantly being picked on by some of the kids who were bigger, and they would gang up in groups of 3 and give me a hard time. And so, I kind of didn't want to talk to them about it, obviously, and there wasn't anybody who was interested. I just wanted somebody to listen to me, anybody to listen to me, but there was nobody to talk to. So it was kind of it was a bit of a lonely existence for the 6-year-old me. So I talked about it a lot at home. But then my father grew up as an only child, and he was the kind of person who he only wanted to talk about things that were of interest to him. And if what you were talking about didn't really pique his interest, he would be quick to shut you down. So I didn't have anybody to talk to about King Kong at school, and so I came home from school thinking that somebody would, and night after night after night I wanted to talk about King Kong. My mother would listen, but she didn't have a lot of input on it. She had taken me to see the film, thankfully. My dad didn't take me to see it because he didn't want to see it, so therefore he didn't go. And that's the way things were in our household. So I had this book, and I would carry it with me everywhere I went. And finally, my father told me, he said, if you talk about King Kong one more time, I'm tired of hearing about it. If you talk about it one more time, I'm going to rip that book in 2. Well, I was 6 years old, and of course you quickly forget the warnings that your parents make when they do that sort of thing. And so I forgot. And maybe it was a week or 2 later, I said something about King Kong, and he immediately took the book, and he went like this, and he just tore it in 2, and he took the separate pieces and flung them on my bed. And he said, maybe that'll teach you to talk about King Kong when I told you not to. Well, I was heartbroken. I was crushed. This was my favorite book, my favorite possession at that time, and I just sat there and cried. I did. And but, in our household, I knew not to make a big deal out of it because it would just get worse with my dad. So it wasn't too long after that, my parents had some people visiting, and my father, I overheard him bragging to the couple that was visiting my parents at our house, talking about how he was amazed at the hand strength that he had. that he was able to tear a paperback book in half with his bare hands, and he was just amazed at the hand strength that he had, that he was able to do that. I didn't think too much of it at the time, but then years later I realized what a terrible thing that was to do to a child. And I wanted to make sure that I never did anything even close to that when it came to being a father myself. And I did not. I always tried to support my children's interests and hobbies. So cut to about 6 months before my father's passing. He died suddenly of liver cancer in the fall of 2021. It was unexpected. And so we were having a conversation, and somehow or another the conversation came up to resentments and parents, and I said, well, I have a few things myself that bother me, but I'm not going to talk about them. And he insisted that I do. And so I brought up the King Kong story again. And the only thing he said was, well, maybe I could have handled some things differently back in those days. But, I'm still amazed that I was able to tear that book in half. He was 76 years old at this point. And I finally realized that we were never going to get there. It just wasn't going to happen. He wasn't ever going to apologize, and it just wasn't ever going to happen. So he passed away not long after that, and that was that's a sad, unresolved thing. But that kind of summarizes the relationship I have with my father. It's very complicated, and when I tell people that it was a complicated relationship, it all ties back into King Kong. My mother's mother actually bought me the copy that I have in my hand. Years later, we were in a used bookstore, and she bought this one. I will give my dad credit. He did buy me the John Barry soundtrack album for the King Kong for my 7th birthday in August of 1977, and I played that until I literally wore it out. So he did do that, but that was because he normally would get us a birthday present, and that was his birthday contribution for that year. It was so he did do that. But the fact that he tore my King Kong paperback into still bothers me to this day. And I know you could say, well, just let it go. And I have tried to let it go, but the pain is still there and it still hurts. So that's my little personal King Kong story. Not to bring things down, but the previous video I did about King Kong 76 was well received, and so I thought I would tell a bit more of a personal story. So thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, all that stuff, if you feel so inclined. And I appreciate those of you who do support what I do. Thank you so much.